Today on I'll Tell You, the revolutionary work written by Don Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra, the ingenious gentleman, Don Quixote of La Mancha. In a village of La Mancha, whose name I do not wish to recall, there lived not long ago one of those gentlemen who keeps a lance in the lance-rack, an ancient shield, a skinny nag, and a running greyhound. This is how Cervantes begins to tell the story of Alonso Quixano, a hidalgo, a low-ranking nobleman without substantial wealth, of about 50 years old, who lives somewhere in La Mancha at the beginning of the 17th century. His hobby is reading chivalric romances, which recount fantastic adventures of knights, princesses, magicians, and enchanted castles. He dedicates himself to these books with such passion that he ends up losing touch with reality and goes mad, believing that he, too, is a knight. Don Quixote sets out alone, wearing ancient and battered armor belonging to his ancestors, and taking his old, gaunt horse from the stable, which he names Rocinante. He cuts a ridiculous figure and a sorry sight. He goes in search of being dubbed a knight. During the journey, our protagonist unleashes his imagination and makes his madness manifest by distorting the reality around him. For instance, he mistakes an inn for a castle and believes the innkeeper is the lord of the castle. He wins his favor with flattering words, and the simple innkeeper, in a ridiculous ceremony, dubs him a knight. After achieving his goal, Don Quixote goes in search of adventure and aims to remedy injustices. Along the way, he finds a farmer violently whipping his stable boy and tries to sort out the tangle. He speaks to them both with knightly pride, and the punisher promises to pay his debt to his servant. When Quixote leaves the spot, the farmer punishes his 15-year-old boy with greater violence and injury, telling the unfortunate lad to collect the debt reported to the shabby knight in lashings. Don Quixote, overjoyed at having resolved the dispute, gets back on Rocinante and, satisfied with his adventures, sings of his love for Dulcinea del Toboso. In his delirious head, he has invented the ideal of Dulcinea, whom he believes to be the most noble and beautiful woman in La Mancha. And when he sees a common peasant woman named Aldonza Lorenzo on the road, he believes her to be the embodiment of his thoughts. He recites his love to her and attempts to defend the fragile lady's honor against some Toledan merchants who mock our demented protagonist. In the end, Don Quixote ends up beaten to a pulp by the merchants. His neighbors find him shouting about his war wounds, so they take him home. There, his niece and the housekeeper decide that the books are the cause of the gentleman's madness. So the priest and the barber decide to burn some books in his library. After recovering at home, he manages to convince a neighboring farmer, Sancho Panza, to be his squire. Sancho, unlike Don Quixote, is an ignorant but practical man. Little by little, he becomes infected by his master's dreams. Don Quixote, Rocinante, Sancho, and his mule set out again on an adventure. They find some windmills, which Don Quixote attacks, believing them to be giants. They also attack a flock of sheep, believing it to be an army. He has a sword duel with a Basque. He frees some inmates, who then attack him. He finds a barber's basin and is convinced that it is a magic helmet, and he lives through comical situations at an inn. On one occasion, Rocinante even chases some mares. With his work, Cervantes invents the modern novel. With humor, he describes Don Quixote's tragedy and the madness of his fantasy, which, in most of his adventures, ends in ridicule. Sometimes, the duo of false knight and squire also manage to succeed. Some dukes invite the unlikely pair to their palace to mock them and make Don Quixote believe that Dulcinea and he are under the spell of the wizard Merlin. Furthermore, they make Sancho a governor to fulfill a promise his master had made to him. To everyone's surprise, Sancho turns out to be a wise ruler. As always, things end badly for both of them in the end. As the work progresses, our protagonist becomes more reflective and self-aware. Sancho, on the contrary, has become a dreamer. After all these adventures, Don Quixote decides to go live high up on a mountain as penance to deserve his lady's love. But his best friends, a priest and a barber, manage to trick him and take him to his village inside a cage. Don Quixote and Sancho return to the fray in a third and definitive sally, seeking a tournament of knightly jousts to prove their worth. Here, the graduate Sanson Carrasco will be responsible for bringing Don Quixote back to sanity, finally convincing him to abandon his fantastical adventures as a knight-errant and return to his home. He decides to challenge him to a joust and disguises himself as the Knight of the Mirrors. Don Quixote, making fantasy his reality, and with fortune as her protector, defeats Carrasco. But later, Sanson Carrasco disguises himself as the Knight of the White Moon and challenges our protagonist to a duel, claiming that his damsel is more beautiful than Dulcinea. Don Quixote accepts the duel and loses. He keeps his word to abandon his wandering for a year. When he returns home, he falls ill and apparently returns to sanity, apologizing for all the trouble he caused and asking to make his will to die in peace. And so ends the delirious story written by Miguel de Cervantes Saavedra. Do you think this book is so famous because we are all a little quixotic? Why do you think Sancho, despite all the misfortunes he suffered, ended up being a dreamer? I would love to read your comments. The story I wrote also has a somewhat crazy guy as the protagonist. If you are interested in reading it and want to support me for keep uploading videos, you can purchase it. The details are in the description. Thank you very much, and see you soon.